Thank you for tuning in to Super Informative News with me, Robert Gutierrez, as your host. Today, I will enlighten you on the war situation happening in Syria, the refugee crisis that has become a consequence of the aforementioned civil war, and the political influence politicians have over whether or not refugees are accepted. Countries are affected differently by worldwide occurrences, and because each country is affected in various ways, the media and politicians portray the situation differently and emphasize different points of view. I have done my research, so I am a credible source. It's important to understand the importance of tactics politicians enforce in their words, because they are ideas and opinions we sometimes take into consideration when developing our own beliefs. I will explain to you the effects of different media coverages and their implementation of theories and ideas, like the hostile media effect theory, the agenda-setting theory, and fear-mongering in news stories. According to Kyrgyzstan, a YouTube channel, Syria has been ran by the al-Assad family since the 1960s, and the government has since been ran as a dictatorship. In 2011, however, many Arab citizens attempted to overturn authoritarian governments into something more equal and fair. While many took down regimes in different countries, the Assads refused to allow Syrian citizens to take over and began a civil war against civilians. Because of the civil war going on between the regime, rebel groups, and religious extremists, many citizens of Syria have been displaced around the country, while others are attempting to seek a better home outside of the country. Although many of Syria's border countries are attempting to intake as many refugees as possible, the efforts of other countries worldwide are needed to ensure almost everyone is safe. Different media outlets, however, portray the situation differently. While some diminish the ideas of bad consequences from accepting refugees, others use the hostile media effect theory, the agenda-setting theory, and fear-mongering to instill fear in accepting these refugees. As I continue to inform you of the matter, allow me to bring to your attention some questions one should ask regarding foreign and local coverage of the Syrian war and the Syrian refugees. What issues do politicians have against allowing Syrian refugees to home themselves in their respective countries? Is the majority of negative opinion from the media or politicians? And also, what ideas are politicians trying to instill in minds of their listeners? Before I begin to describe the analysis of the media coverage throughout different countries, let me inform you of the different media outlets I researched. Although there were different articles and videos I watched to examine different portrayals, some of the major publications observed were the United States' Time, Huffington Post, and CNN. Most of these would generally be assumed to lean towards liberal opinions. However, the conclusions sometimes lean towards conservative ideologies more so than towards liberal. I used mainly Al Jazeera English and Asharq al-Awsat English for my Middle Eastern media, and they shared similar ideas to that of the American media. I also found some simple YouTube videos that helped explain the timeline of the situation in easy-to-understand terms. Hostile media effect is used heavily in the distribution of information. This effect explains that information is sent to all audiences. The way people interpret the information, however, depends on the values and ideologies each person believes in. If a person is against the information being received, they will consider it biased reporting, because it goes against the viewer's ideals. If a person is unopposed to the ideas, he or she will consider it unbiased and informative. Agenda-setting theory is also used quite prominently in these outlets. So often there are news articles about the situation. Agenda-setting theory helps conclude that the more often a situation or story is included in the media, the more likely viewers are to perceive the aforementioned as being extremely important. Fear-mongering is also implemented in the media to scare its viewers. Fear-mongering, also known as scaremongering, is defined as the deliberate use of fear-based tactics to influence the public in order to achieve a desired outcome. Although the mission of this research was to show the biased nature of United States versus Middle Eastern media, The conclusions from the research showed that there were definitely both sides portrayed in both medias. I made the assumption the United States would report more on the negative and dangerous impact accepting Syrian refugees would have, but Al Jazeera also had similar articles explaining cons of accepting refugees. One key point I discovered, however, is that most of the negative aspects came from words and ideas politicians told the public, and not actually the media itself. In a news article by Time written by Dr. Ben Carson, he explains that the reality that the threat of radical Islam and the corrosive influence of Sharia law here in the U.S. is not just a figment of our imagination. The U.S. must defend itself by preventing the infiltration of terrorists who poses refugees to enter our land. To do anything less is foolish. In saying these words, Ben Carson instills a fear in American viewers that by offering Syrian refugees a home in the United States, we are also welcoming terrorists to make their safe haven in the States. This, however, is not accurate. In an article by the Huffington Post, their statistics state that since 9/11, the United States has taken in 784,000 refugees, and only 3 have been arrested for terrorist-related activities. The majority of Syrian refugees are simple citizens, like you and me, who are seeking escape from a civil war that is going on in their home country. Most of these people are innocent and would prefer to live in their home country instead of having to travel somewhere new. But the harmful living conditions in Syria make it difficult and necessary to seek safe haven someplace else. In another article written by the Huffington Post, they quote words of President-elect Donald Trump saying, "The U.S. is admitting tens of thousands of Syrian refugees who are definitely, in many cases, ISIS-aligned." As previously stated, many of these refugees are non-related to the war taking place in Syria, and are mostly victims of the attacks and devastations. President-elect Trump often talks of the importance of sending refugees back because they are ISIS-related and will bring terrorism to the United States. This is agenda setting and fear-mongering in action. In an article from Al Jazeera English, newly elected Lebanon President Michael Aoun uses the same tactics as the politicians in the United States to sway citizens of his country to oppose allowing more refugees into the country of Lebanon. He instills fear in the citizens of Lebanon by emphasizing that there will be no solution in Syria without the return of Syrian refugees to their country. Al Jazeera also states that Aoun characterized refugees as a security threat and that it was essential that camps be prevented from becoming safe havens for terrorists. In making these generalizations, President Aoun instills fear in the citizens and persuades them to believe that Syrian refugees carry terrorist threats with everyone accepted into the country. Many politicians spread their reasons for sending refugees back to Syria and not allowing their countries to accept any more without stating facts or statistics that help back up their claims. According to factcheck.org, many ideas that politicians state are false. Trump states most Syrian refugees are ISIS-related, when, in actuality, 67% of the refugees referred to the U.S. by the United Nations have been children under the age of 12 and women. Also, according to factcheck.org, Trump and Ben Carson claim that President Obama plans to accept 100,000 to 250,000 refugees, but this statement is false. By law, the administration can only slightly admit more than 10,000 in 2016's fiscal year. In conclusion, I hope this newscast has helped shed light on the efforts of politicians to influence media and public opinion with the primary use of fear-mongering. Agenda setting and the hostile media effect also play a large role in the public perception of circumstances. The Syrian refugee crisis is only one out of the thousands of issues going on in the world right now, but it's important to do your own research when developing your own ideas. The majority of Syrian refugees are not terrorists or ISIS related. They are mostly compiled of women, children, and most of all, victims of the civil war taking place in Syria. Although there is not much that one person can do alone, if everyone bands together to ensure the refugees have a safe place to go to in their time of need, much can be done to save their lives. Thank you for tuning into Super Informative News. I'm your host, Robert Gutierrez. Have a good night.